there's so many data sources now, and when you talk to our statistical analysts, modelers, and they've always said, I want more data, I want more data, I want more data. Well, they really have no idea how much data there is out there today. And so it's impossible to move it all internally from platform to platform. And so having cloud environments or having a place where things can be stored, and if you need a lot at one point, you have a place to put it, and if you don't need a lot, you can actually kind of shrink that down. You've got to figure out that balance from a cost perspective as well as an availability and accessibility side. And in order to continue to succeed in us as more and more data sources come, the tools to collate and figure out how we get that data down to the form where analysts can look at it, to the form where we can make trend analysis out of it. There's so many tools that will help us do that, and a traditional IT kind of, if you have a tool to get that tool installed through the securities and all the different ways, it's going to be nearly impossible for us to meet deadlines and timelines for that. We need type of cloud environments where applications can be free-flowing within that to help analyze the data and information. And I see that's really key to the value. Proving that value, I think, is the real next step for us.
It's fundamentally not just a question about data. Data is sort of the basic or foundational layer of that. But it's ultimately, the value proposition is about turning that data into insight and ultimately into actionable decisions that can be made across the firm. Because if you think about what's the purpose of data, it needs to drive improvement in the business, either through increased revenue, or fundamentally either through increased revenue or through lower costs. So the ultimate question is, how do I, what is the question that I need to answer? And a lot of people tend to try and look at this from a technology perspective and just purely throw technology against what, without looking at what is the fundamental question that I'm trying to answer that will help drive one of those two things, either increase top line revenue or to reduce the expense structure.
All of us up here and several folks I know in the audience have found it's not quite as simple as simply saying, pick a vendor, I don't want to name any names, and saying, okay, I want to do big data, let's go, let's sign up and let's get it done and turn the switch on. There is a tremendous amount in some cases of very simple but sometimes overlooked hurdles that need to be overcome.
Well, that's an excellent point, Bruce. And I think a lot of times the fascination with the technology or the potential capability clouds what the business wants to get and what they need to get.
Good choice of words.
I like that. And so what we need to do is actually step back to more basic methodologies. Work with the business on understanding what their requirements are. Right? We tend to I love doing things quickly. I love doing things as efficiently as possible. But some of the things that I've seen, especially with Agile, is it's an excuse not to put the time in up front. And we're going to do an Agile process, which means we can just jump right into it. So when we go and do these things, we've got to step back and say, what are we really trying to get out of it? What do we need? How do we want to get it? What's the action once we get that information? And then how do we feed that back into our processes to make them better?
Yeah, I think there's fundamentally a paradigm shift, and I also sit in the business. So that ultimate paradigm shift is that we can't think of it as two distinct pieces anymore. It's not technology versus business. It's really much more of a combined and hybrid process than it ever was, which means both parties need to know to at least a functional understanding point of the other. You cannot throw technology at the solution because you need to know what is the problem you're addressing on one hand. And on the flip side, from the business, they need to understand at least some semblance of what technology is capable of doing, such that you can put that paradigm, or that is the lens of how you see what problem can be solved. And the initial piece of that is just jumping in and deciding, well, let's answer a few of these questions, or let's ask some fundamental questions. Can we get this? Can we get this piece of insight out of the data? And that actually, what that really creates is more sets of questions, refined questions that can ultimately help drive this growing, these sets of data that we have, that all our organizations consume, into something that can turn into insight and ultimately decision making that can improve the firm.